right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to look at our wardrobes in a totally new light. The source material for this explainer has a fascinating and, frankly, a pretty critical take on modern fashion. It sees our clothes not just as, style, but as a mirror, one that reflects some deep societal issues. So, what could possibly be wrong with the way we dress today? Let's dive in.
So the whole argument from our source really starts with this one simple idea. Fashion is a statement. The point is, whether we spend hours planning an outfit or just, grab whatever's on top of the pile, our clothes are always sending a message about who we are. And that, right there, leads us to the big question for this entire explainer. If our clothes are speaking for us, what in the world are they saying right now in this era? The source suggests the answer, well, it might be a lot more complicated and maybe even more troubling than we think. To even begin to answer that, our source material says we have to go back in time. It argues that to really get a handle on today's fashion, we've got to start with this super pivotal moment, the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s. Think about it. That super casual style that pretty much dominates everything today. The source traces it right back to the anti-establishment movement of the 60s. Now, it's noted this was seen as a totally justifiable rebellion against a social structure that felt corrupt and hypocritical. And the youth back then, they used their clothes to broadcast that distrust. And you can see how this all unfolded on this timeline. The argument is that the 1960s rejection of the suit kicked off this whole process that just slowly dismantled formal dress codes. First, it morphed into business casual in the 90s, and then, well, it led right to today, where casual is pretty much the default setting for almost every situation. So what happened because of this revolution? According to the source, it sparked a really fundamental shift. We moved away from shared traditions and that sense of reverence, like putting on your Sunday best. And instead, we ended up with a system totally driven by individual personal taste and the rise of street fashion. Okay, so that history brings us right up to the present day. How does all that build into the core critique of modern fashion? Well, our source points to three main problems with the statements our clothes are making right now. The source really breaks its critique down into three connected claims. First, the idea that casual fashion promotes laxity, a kind of disrespect and focus on the ego. Second, that it actually lowers our standards, and it cites trends it calls thug fashion as an example of glorifying base behavior instead of nobility. And third, that it creates this ironic and almost overwhelming focus on the erotic. In that third point, this is where the source points out what it sees as a huge contradiction. A key goal of past social movements was for women to be seen as more than just sexual objects. But the argument here is that a lot of modern fashion does the exact opposite, making a statement that, in the source's view, almost exclusively declares a woman's erotic sexuality. And this is where the argument moves from the societal to the really personal, to what the source believes is the deepest problem of all. It connects all these fashion issues to one single profound consequence, the blunting of our intuition. So what on earth does this source mean by the intuition? It's defined as a kind of spiritual sensor, almost like an inner compass. The idea is that this sensor is meant to receive these subtle impulses or nudges that are supposed to guide us through life, to help us learn the lessons we need for our own spiritual growth. Okay, so how does a piece of clothing connect to this inner compass? The theory presented goes something like this. When fashion focuses on what the source calls base instincts and eroticism, it creates a kind of spiritual noise. It's described as a sexually charged energy field that's just so loud. It drowns out the quiet, subtle signals from our intuition, making it way harder to hear that guidance. And this is the number one problem, according to the source. It's not just about lax standards or any one thing individually. The main argument is that all these elements combine to create this constant state of distraction, one that weakens our most essential tool for growth, our own intuition. That is the ultimate consequence here. So what's the final takeaway in all this? The source concludes that in the end, our fashion is acting like a giant mirror, giving us a crystal clear reflection of our society and maybe our own inner development. This really brings the whole argument full circle. The source draws a direct line between the outer world and our inner state with this final, really powerful claim. It says, the state of our spiritual development is manifest in the chaos, confusion, and ills that plague society and clearly declared in the fashion statements made every day. Which leaves us with this one last question from the source material to chew on. Is our fashion a conscious statement that we are choosing to make? Or is it just a symptom of a much deeper cultural condition? That's the thought we'll leave you with. Thanks for watching The Explainer.